Hey everyone, welcome back to the 443 Security Simplified. I'm your host, Mark the Liberty, and joining me today is
Corey Bandon China Knockreiner.
Are you?
I hope not. But with all the
be.
banning we're doing, maybe I will be soon.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. On today's episode, we will discuss the United States' most recent ban on all consumer routers not made in the country. Before talking about a interesting phishing campaign using OAuth Device Flow Authentication phishing. Yeah, it's more interesting than that came off. And then we will end with
SaaS applications with OAuth issues, right?
Yep. And then we will end with a review of Google Cloud's Threat Horizons report for the second half of 2025.
I'm sure they're saying the clouds are all white and fluffy and safe, and it's all sunshine and rainbows. Certainly no thunderclouds, right?
It looks pretty stormy to me. Well, with that, let's go ahead and, lightning strike our way in. So to start it out, big news out of our homeland, where last week the U.S. Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, took a pretty dramatic step to ban all new foreign-made consumer internet routers over security concerns by adding them to the covered list, as it's called, which is the covered items from Section 2 of the Secure Networks Act. Finds itself alongside all technology from Huawei, ZTE, Kaspersky Labs, and Chinese manufactured drones as well. Basically,
that any new device at all. I don't care about drones or anything.
No.
Is it sad I'm more upset about that than pretty much every single router you can buy as a consumer in America? Anyways, we'll get into it.
Says a lot to your hobbies, that's for sure. So they added it to the list, which means all new, not currently approved. So only net new products are now by default banned from the United States if they're not manufactured here, at least for consumer routers, at least.
At first.
Anything existing, anything you already have purchased and deployed is still currently allowed. But anything brand new being introduced into our market has to go through, it's banned by default, but there is a exceptions process that they can follow in order to request an exception to this list. They claim that this is to resolve issues introduced in supply chain vulnerabilities that could disrupt the U.S. economy and critical infrastructure. But like I mentioned, so the Department of War, as it's called now, and the Department of Homeland Security can grant an exception if device manufacturers fill out a bunch of questions in an annex to this order. The questions are...
And then wait for a process. Like they have to answer the questions and then see what the result is.
Correct. The questions are, as you might expect, they request information about the corporate structure. They want to specifically know, like anyone that has more than a 5% equity in it, what the board looks like, any foreign government ownership or influence. I suspect if China pops up in there at all, it'll probably get banned. Then they ask about manufacturing and supply chain risks. They want a detailed bill of materials. They want to know the country of origin for all components, a justification for why it's not manufactured in the United States, as well as detailed information on where it is manufactured, including final assembly and testing.
Justification be, I'm not aware of a consumer router that is made in the United States, unless you go the assembled route, where maybe you take a fully created board with a foreign Taiwan-based firmware and you put it in a box, and now it's assembled in United. So I think is there a router that is made in the United States? I'm even including Cisco, maybe Cisco.
I feel like they are probably all manufactured overseas. Oh, it looks like Starlink's Wi-Fi routers are made in the great state of Texas.
Oh, yeah.
So there's one allowed option. But so I think there's like two components to this. Like there is like undeniably a cyber risk in some of these devices. Like we've seen Huawei and ZTE specifically backdoors that could border on the lines of, not backdoors, but like vulnerabilities that could
Potential
border along the
backdoors,
lines of backdoors.
backdoors or hard-coded in vulnerabilities that were really bad. And when you know they're a Chinese-based company, you always have to wonder, was it an accident or was it on purpose?
Yeah. There's also clearly, as we've discussed multiple times over the last year, attacks going on against edge networking equipment. So it
For
makes
sure.
sense why this would be a focus area for them too. But like another piece for this is clearly just the manufacturing side and kind of aligning with the current administration's desire for just everything consumed in the US to be manufactured in the US. Because like one of the requirements for this exception request is a detailed time-bound plan for establishing or expanding manufacturing in the United
Yeah.
States for the router as well.
Which, by the way, I don't mind in theory, right? It'd be cool to be having jobs in manufacturing here, but the cost profile here is quite different in consumer. Like the issue with any sort of plan like this is, yeah, it would be one of the things a different administration did is trying to get more chip manufacturing in the United States because there's risk there. The problem is banning before you actually have it in, like literally, I'm not joking when I say every consumer router is foreign and they're well used. I mean, they're the first thing you kind of buy or get from your telco company, and we need them. And you kind of have to sort out having a supply of US ones before you get this aggressive. So to me, it's more chicken before the egg. And I also think yes, it would be great, but there's reasons business manufactured. The same billionaires that may love things like this won't like the cost of manufacturing in the United States. Anyway, it's just weird. Yeah, but I would love to see more routers made here.
I agree, and I think that's where it's going to be. Like, no matter what, this is going to drive up costs of consumer network equipment because either it will be made here, which means it will cost 10 times as much to be manufactured, or the administrative overhead of like managing this new exception process will likely add to the cost as well too. And I don't know. In principle, I'm not exact. I don't think I'm against this type of
I feel like
activity.
it should be more targeted. Like when you
Mhm.
dive into the list that I was showing for a second for the YouTube viewers of the ones they're pointing out, they're the ones we agree with: ZTE, Huawei, the bad actors. I feel like from a security standpoint, we need to do something here, but it shouldn't be all foreign entities are considered bad. It should be targeted to known situations with evidence. So I feel like this is a mix of a security reason for banning, which should be more targeted, that I agree with, but then something that's more just to drive economy, like to drive politics and votes. Like at the end of the day, by the way, the people in the administration now are part of the class of rich people that probably outsourced all this back then to save costs for the companies that have made trillions of dollars in profit for the top 1%. And now they're saying, let's bring it back because I know everyone wants American jobs. But the real reality is they don't want to pay the costs that they're doing. So I feel like I agree with the security standpoint of the whole premise, but I feel like a blanket ban was not the right choice for that. And you could do a much more targeted one that would help protect and maybe have some more responsibilities on, if you're a foreign made device, you have to have more forced automatic firmware updates, because there's plenty of legitimate foreign devices that I don't think are nation state exposed on purpose. And then it's more about get them up to a security practice that makes them not have 0 days as often. Or I think the biggest issue isn't that it's 0 days, it's that consumer people don't patch their routers fast enough, even when there was a fix 2 years ago. So I don't I think the blanket ban personally is too much. And the fact that yes, there's a security point for this that I agree with. I think there's more going on here that is forcing it to be blanket rather than targeted for security purposes.
Now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give the Steelman argument on this one, Corey, and I'm curious what your thoughts are for this.
Yeah.
So blanket ban, massively disruptive. Steelman, like the strongest,
Like same as Wicker Man, or no, it's a stronger version of Wicker Man. I get
correct.
it. I get it.
So the alternative to this could have been just ban stuff manufactured in China, which we have, like, we've already banned drones from China. We've banned Huawei and ZTE, like specific component or companies from China. So if we're saying we want to control risk around consumer routers, we're specifically concerned about China. I think the strongman argument or the steelman argument is,
I think I know where you're going.
well, we can say we ban everything manufactured in China, but what's to stop them from doing the final assembly in Vietnam and then shipping it to the United States and saying, oh, this is a Vietnamese router? So then we're playing like this cat and mouse game of, it's clearly Chinese, but manufactured elsewhere. That gets, because we saw a lot of that with some of the sanctions avoidance, not sanctions, the tariff avoidance from some of that chaotic activity going on. So I could see why they just said, screw it. The default state is everything's banned, but it is still pretty disruptive.
I thought you were going another route, but to kind of add on to your point, the fact that this is a ban everything, but there's an exception process. The other security argument I thought you might be making is like a whitelisting approach. Like we want you to only allow our an analogy of this. Me and Mark would love to have a situation where we can force our users to only run executables and programs we've allowed, and anything that's not allowed, they have to jump through a bit of security review with us before we allow it. And so I thought you were going to argue maybe they don't want to blanket ban every country, but by whitelisting, by forcing it, they're forcing people to go through a process that gives you a chance to
Yep.
validate the security. So that I can buy off on even more than I agree. You're right that there's ways to backdoor the system too from geography. It's like, the analogy there is VPNs get past country blocks. So I get both of those make sense. So yeah, that's true. I'll give that to you. I'm not sure I personally, like, now we're talking whether that's their real motive or like is their real
Mhm.
motive security. But either way, you are right that that is a good security outcome.
But so some of our listeners might be wondering, is the firebox affected? Because it is, believe it or not manufactured in the United States. Good news is, like, long story short, it is not affected by this. There's a pretty clear definition on what they mean by both routers and consumer grade networking equipment. And our technology does not fall under consumer grade networking devices. And so we
By the
are,
way, this answer has gone through our legal department too, so it's not just a guesstimate answer.
Mark's opinion.
Yeah.
I would not take legal
Although
advice.
I agree. I mean, your opinion is how I would have read it before legal as well too. But just so you know, me and Mark have look. We are watching it though. By the way, our company and people in it has saw the thing immediately and started to look into it.
Yep. But so if you are in the US and you're looking for your new Netgear or Linksys, or is D-Link still a company? D-Link router? The shelves may soon be bare at your local Best Buy as you
Well, not
as they
really,
work
because
through this
all the
process.
existing ones can sell out. But in about a year, they might be bare. By the
Yeah.
way, this is it's a false equivalency, but we sell small devices, tabletop devices that maybe not with all the great services, but can get down to a price where they're maybe 4 times or 5 times the amount of a consumer router. And I always have people like, or I not always, sometimes there's people that learn in my company, which we're really targeting businesses, not consumers, but are like, I just can't buy that because, I can go get this Linksys that says it's a firewall. Immediately, it's a false equivalency because we're better than that. But actually, this could be a good thing for business, because if we start manufacturing consumer routers here, I bet you our tabletop devices are suddenly going to be consumer priced with, 10 times the security. So maybe we're not going to change our market focus, but maybe we'll end up getting consumer customers one day.
Yeah. Screw all you guys. Mark and Corey are going to get their bonuses next year. This is awesome.
Sorry about the prices that are. I mean, we're all freaking dealing with the prices right now.
Yep. So I don't know. I predict this is going to be rather chaotic at the start, but I actually think there will be some good net benefits to come out of this. At a minimum, even just getting a bunch of this information about supply chain for network equipment documented will
Yeah.
it'll be beneficial. and have a security
We've
impact on our
always
country.
wanted a government mostly based security scorecard for IoT equipment. And while this isn't that, by them forcing the process, they're kind of doing that sign off in the background. So, hey, could be good.
Yeah, I guess we will see how it pans out. And in the meantime, I guess time to go stock up on consumer routers that you can sell on the underground marketplaces
Oh,
before
wow.
once all this gets banned.
You're totally smart. It's like buying all the new Nintendo Switch 3s out before anyone can get them and selling them for twice or three times or even more the cost. We should go buy a bunch of consumer routers now, Mark, and just be the lovely people that everyone likes because we scalp them.
Screw Pokemon cards. The next gen currency is going to be D-Link routers.
Oh God, I hope not. I
Oh, I
quit.
hope not too. Anyways, moving on. I saw just this last week a really interesting write up from our friends and enemies over at Huntress, where they
By
talked
the way,
about
not enemies, other than we also have MDR as a service for MSPs, and they're good at their job. So
I,
we want to show people we are too.
I consider all my competitors enemies,
That's
even if
true.
they do fantastic research from time to time.
Go chop off
Uh,
their heads, Mark.
exactly. So, well, I don't know. We'll see. So Huntress's SOC published a really interesting write up about a phishing campaign they had uncovered using the platform as a service offering railway.com to host an interesting phishing campaign that targeted 344 organizations. So they gave an update just a couple days ago with some more details about like the exact campaign and some of the toolkit that was being used in this. But the original report basically just talked through how on March 2nd, they noticed a wave of phishing attacks targeting some of their MDR customers, which they traced back to this campaign that actually started in mid February or so. There were some interesting tidbits from it where all the phishing messages were tailored towards specific recipients, and no two lures were identical. I'm going to extrapolate that into probably some LLM usage in there to custom tailor phishing messages at this scale towards potential victims.
Yep.
They had weaponized Railway, which is a platform as a service offering. And specifically, they suspect they were like vibe coded up all this infrastructure to let
They're
them.
pretty. I agree with them, by the way. The fact that they believe there's some AI used in the vibe coding, they are very clear that the external indicators you see from the fish are just the fish and the IP and the infrastructure. So they can't tell you we know they did this. But if you read the details, it's hard. The speed, especially with how these campaigns change to target things, it seems their takeaways seem very obvious to me to be very likely.
They mentioned that even the free tier for Railway works great as a hosting engine for this because all their IP space is clean for Microsoft's risk scoring, which really helps it out. Microsoft, with their conditional access policies, you can block like authentication attempts from risky locations, for example. This would allow it to go through. So it uses OAuth device code phishing, which, if you're not familiar with the device code authentication flow for OAuth, if you've ever like logged into Netflix on your TV, it tells you to go to netflix.com/device and enter in the little 6 digits that show up on your TV. That's basically authenticating your television as a device under your identity for a period of time.
Very, very convenient, by the way. I think every consumer, whether you knew it was OAuth device tokens, love it because remember when you had to go to your Apple TV or your Roku and you had to not only type your password, but you're a good security person that has a long random password. And of course, your password manager is not on Roku. So you have to like type this 24 character random password. Then, oh, yeah, you remembered MFA. So now it's a pain. And this is all on a Roku with a remote control, not a keyboard. So I remember those days. And this is the process Mark was talking about where you literally look at a QR code and then you accept it after logging on to the same service on your phone. It
Sounds
really
like you vividly remember those days, Corey.
I'm an old man. Get off my lawn. Anyways, it's no wonder that these device codes, which then they bypass everything, right? Once you have a device code, there's no MFA, there's no logon, it's an approved device. So there's obviously a security concern and weakness there, but it kind of sucks because this is a very useful and, in my opinion, kind of needed thing for the use cases that you allow devices. But you should
Yeah.
think about that with every, and we can talk about security tips later. But yeah,
Basically, they trick the victims into going to Microsoft.com/device login and pasting in the code they give them. And like you said, grants them an OAuth token with no password, no MFA that's valid for 90 days by default within these accounts. And often like hidden from most of like the authentication logs that you would look at in a Microsoft tenant. They mentioned that Railway was hosting almost the entirety of the token attack chain, and also the services that were using those tokens to log into Microsoft. All that authentication activity came from their IP addresses. The actual like phishing infrastructure was hosted elsewhere, though.
there is a little good news there, right, for the IP addresses, though, because you mentioned one of the benefits of this attack is Railway is a very legitimate and trusted app, even in M365, and they have huge ranges of IPs. But you really don't want to block those huge ranges because there's a ton of legitimate stuff there. It sounded like there were only a smaller number of IPs, three really, for most of this activity. So as far as practical tips later, you don't have to block everything, which is kind of nice.
Yep. They had some interesting evasion techniques along the way too. So instead of just sending their phishing URL directly, they actually abused a lot of legitimate security vendors' URL rewriting capabilities to basically hide a redirect loop to the ultimate URL. So basically, when you receive the phishing message, instead of being like hackingwebsite.com, it was secureweb.cisco.com or mimecastprotect.com, which is a legitimate URL and would evade some URL based detection capabilities. They abused a bunch of like compromised sites for a redirect chain. Basically, the Mimecast one would go to a compromised WordPress website that had a redirector to the where they were hosting the fish, which we'll get into in a second, or hop through a couple of different stops before getting to that final one.
That's just more evasion, right? That's them. Even if you have something looking at the first good URL, they're hoping at some point it cares less and might miss it because of the mini hops.
Yep. For the actual fish itself, like it got delivered over a bunch of different methods, but the end result was almost always giving the user a 8-digit code and telling them to continue to Microsoft to go enter that code. And if they were logged in, they paste in the code and now authorizes the attacker's fictional device and grants them access to that victim's account. They were using Cloudflare's workers.dev infrastructure in order to host the actual the fish in this case. So workers.dev was the domain it was being hosted on, which is a serverless hosting service from Cloudflare. That was pretty interesting. And then to deliver it, they often used Microsoft Dynamics 365 customer voice feature, which is like a way to send surveys to customers through Microsoft's platform. They used it instead to host a link to where they were sharing these kind of malicious documents that had the fish contained in them too. Go ahead, Corey.
No,
Oh,
no,
looked like you wanted to pipe in.
nope.
And finally, like when it came to connecting to Microsoft using these tokens, they even set up user agents to mimic legitimate web browsers too, to just try and mask their activity even more from the threat actors. It was pretty dang interesting, all things said and done. Like in this type of authentication flow, like you said, it is kind of scary. Like all it takes is a user that's already logged into Microsoft to get tricked into entering that code. And boom, now they've got a 90-day by default valid token for that user account.
Yep.
I could see why they would be targeting it. But at the end of the day, it still does require user interaction, which is I mean, clearly
Hopefully,
it works,
every time you're
but
adding a device to your account, any account, Amazon, whatever. By the way, sometimes there's cross-account things that I think is a similar auth token. Like for instance, say you have Steam, but you wanted to access your I don't know, your GOG games. You can, or you want GOG to see your Steam games. You can basically add GOG to Steam, And while it's not a device, it uses the same type of OAuth mechanism. So anytime you're doing that, whether it's a device, whether it's crossing and linking accounts, you should definitely be thinking about it. And if we look at practical tips, there is places in all of these cloud apps, clouds, where you can go and see connected devices and connected accounts. And I think until there's a better way for security tools or from the cloud providers themselves to kind of help you audit this on a more regular basis, I think it should be a practical tip that you need to go look at your devices manually at least every quarter, preferably more, although I don't think anyone will do it more, and just check to make sure the devices you have linked are still devices you really expect and want to be there. I mean, hopefully you're not going to fall for the fish that makes you do this in the first place, and you will think about it every time you add a device like this. But you can go monitor those, and I occasionally will go look at them just to make sure I still want, WhatsApp to trust my iPad and my phone and my watch and the new whatever I bought.
And your phone that you lost 2 years ago, kind of thing.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what I want to find. Oh, wait a second, that phone I sold, hopefully it's factory reset and it doesn't matter. Why is it still there? Why do I have 7 Kindles on my Amazon account when I only use 1? Oh, yeah, I never got rid of the ones when I continue to upgrade. That's the kind of
Yep.
thing you want to get rid of just in case. And when you get rid of those, you might find that, wait a second, what is this device I don't even recognize? Is it even a device? Nope, you were railroaded.
I'd also argue like businesses should probably just block device code authentication flows entirely and only allow it for specific identities that do need it. Like
That
most of your
makes sense.
users are not going to need to sign in to their TV or whatever with a your business Microsoft account.
Yep.
And maybe you've got one or two service accounts you use at like, I don't know, tablets in your booth at RSA or something. And those might need some sort of access like that. But you can disable it using conditional access policies and only allow it explicitly where it needs to.
Love that.
But yeah, interesting phishing campaign. Um, as soon as I read the article, I went and audited our infrastructure, and thankfully, none of our users fell for any of those types of phishes because that would have been sketchy. Anyways, so moving on to the last story, Google published their Cloud Threat Horizons report for the second half of the year. I guess it's H1 2026. So last year's data published the first half of this year, which is filled with a whole bunch of information they claim is from the office of their CISO, their threat intelligence group, Mandiant, and then various product and security teams within the Google Cloud platform. And it has an interesting mix of takeaways from both GCP, so Google's cloud, as well as third-party cloud and SaaS applications too. So I thought we could take some time to go through some of their findings and I don't know, maybe talk about what surprised or didn't surprise us along the way. And so first section is where they dive into Google Cloud findings within their own environment specifically. They talked about first, like the initial access vector for how people are compromising Google Cloud tenants or subscriptions or whatever the heck they're called. And one thing stood out to me was the software-based entry as a category. If you scroll down a little bit on the page, Corey.
I know. As soon
Okay.
as you said it, I know exactly.
Software-based entry was the biggest vector at 44.5%, which is up slightly from last year. And this is largely thanks
No, no,
to
no. Oh, wait. Is it up slightly? I thought it was up a ton. Oh, maybe I was missing
you're right, up significantly from 2.9%. Yeah.
2.9 to almost half. Like, that is
Yep.
a freaking huge change.
Meanwhile, there was a bit of a drop from things like weak or absent credentials, which went from 47% to 27%. But it was interesting seeing like vulnerabilities and like code execution points being such a big piece of the pie.
For sure. I mean, we talk a lot about hackers log in, they don't hack in, meaning that, phish identity theft, credential theft, and even things like OAuth token misuse, like we just talked about, really isn't like a O-day hack. It's misusing an identity is usually the big thing. As much as we nerd out about zero-day and fully technical attacks. They seem to be rare in the past, so this is a big explosion. This is where I'm getting I like this stood out to me too. We didn't collaborate on what we were talking about for this section, but this is speculation, but I wonder if this is AI assisted vulnerability. Maybe not discovery, because they do talk later that these are known CVEs, but known CVEs are often found internally, and the bad guy still would have to reverse and figure out the CV after it was published if there was no exploit before, if it wasn't literally a 0-day. So the amount of software-based vulnerabilities blew me away too. And one of the things I think you and me both agree on and we're predicting is expect to see more vulnerability exploits in 0-day in the coming years because of AI-based discovery. So I'm just curious if this could be AI based, helping people exploit vulnerabilities even if they don't have the technical knowledge to reverse patches and stuff like that.
They seem to have follow the same speculation lines. They said that they suspected it was threat actors opting for more automated paths in software-based entry. Basically, like phishing, you can automate it, but it is way easy to automate exploiting a known vulnerability if you've got the proof of concept. And so I could see how this is artificial intelligence being let loose to go after these environments, and it takes the easiest way in, which could be an unpatched flaw.
Yep.
Other categories, some misconfigurations dropped from 29% to 21%, but still like a good fifth of all incidents were caused by misconfigurations. And then what they labeled as sensitive UI or API exposure dropped way down to just 5%. So we're getting better at hardening our endpoints, but I guess we kind of suck at patching our endpoints, unfortunately. So
And then,
that
by the
was
way, this is not endpoints. This is cloud and SaaS apps.
cloud endpoints,
So
right?
this is really kind of, are you configuring Microsoft 365 correctly? Are you configuring Google Workspace, or more specifically Google's platform as a service, Google Cloud? There's plenty of secure configuration you can do in Amazon AWS, M365, name any SaaS app on top of that. But they also give you the capability to turn things off and shoot yourself in the foot, or worse yet, the face. So I do think the misconfiguration is interesting, because I like, you guys know how to harden traditional servers and traditional network devices and traditional on-premise stuff, but are you doing the proper security configuration in every single SaaS app, which has a completely different way to configure itself? Like, the configuration settings in M365 are completely, while they have the same ideas of different things, it's completely different places to tweak than it would be for Google Workspace and AWS from Azure. So it's important to know this is specifically those cloud things. And I think a lot of our MSPs need tools to help find these sorts of misconfigurations.
So now this was specifically Google Cloud Platform. They then go on to talk about other third-party platforms, which includes both public cloud but also SaaS
SaaS.
applications.
Yeah.
And the picture was a little bit different once you look at that bucket of
We'll look at that later. Yeah.
well, specifically they said threat actors exploited identity issues 83% of the time in
Gotcha.
those. So significantly higher than attacks against the Google Cloud Platform. And my first thought was, okay, what are like AWS and Azure doing different than Google? But I'm willing to bet that like the bigger differentiator was actually the SaaS applications themselves versus
The
like
complexity of
web.
Google Cloud's configuration is way higher than the complexity of, say, like a Google. I would say Google Workspace and M365 do have more complexity than an average SaaS app, because they're pretty big SaaS apps. But I could see Google Cloud, AWS, and Azure, all the infrastructure and platform as a service. The amount of capabilities and configuration is very deep. So maybe it's easier to misconfigure such a big thing. I would still expect things like Google Workspace and M365 to have more misconfiguration potential than, say, a little SaaS app that's very limited scope. But I'm just guessing. Either way, it sounds like for SaaS apps, it gets more down to these identities, weak or absent probably more like identity abuse or credential abuse. But I hear you.
Yep. So they
How far
said
do I have to scroll
83
for
right
that one?
there. Yep.
Cool.
So 83% of events were
There we go.
from just
Phishing.
involved identity and broken into a few different categories. First one, so phishing was about like a third of that. But what stood out to me in there is more than
Ooh,
half of all phishing was voice
ooh,
phishing
that's
specifically.
insane. That's not insane. It's expected with LLM, like with AI being able to automate that, but it's not what I would have expected. Insane.
It is, yeah, different from what we historically would see in phishing,
Yeah.
where like I tend to think phishing is almost entirely email, maybe a bit of like text or whatever. Voice would have typically be way further down. I did not expect it to be more than half.
We have had past predictions where we've predicted this, and yet we haven't. To me, this is a clear indication that those pretty like, you know what I mean? The trends showed this was starting to happen, but this to me is a very clear indication that it's here, and we those older predictions are probably starting to come through. I remember a
Yep.
vishing prediction specifically.
Of the other identity ones, third party abusing third party trust relationships was another pretty big chunk, around 21%, I think it was, of total events,
I wonder if
which
the railways flaw would have fallen within that category if you could have
I think
done
it was
something
more
similar
like
to the cloud.
the Salesforce breaches that we've been seeing over the last year or so,
But either way,
where
what I mean is like, accepting a OAuth token to connect
mm,
accounts, or I don't either way, yeah,
yep.
Salesforce, okay.
Another big chunk was just stolen credentials, so either compromised human or non-human identities, stolen in a way that wasn't phishing, I suppose. So think like uploaded to a public source repository or stolen by info stealing malware. Malicious insiders made up 7%, which is a pretty big chunk on its own. The examples they gave were people like shiny hunters going and paying $10,000 for employees like HAR files, like exports from their browser with all their authenticated session cookies in it. Like if you can find a low paid employee and offer them a big chunk of money, that is clearly successful as a method for these threat actors. 7% of events abuse that too. Of the rest, there was only 2% for vulnerability exploitation, like really damn small compared to what we saw on the platform itself on Google's side. Um, but yeah, huge
That
attacks against
makes sense,
identity.
I think, because, like, if you're talking a SaaS app, that's entirely managed by the vendor, and so when they learn of vulnerabilities, they fix them fast, and fixing in their cloud fixes it for everyone. When you have a platform as a service application, you literally have to allow things like people bringing their own virtual machines or microservices and or containers, and those containers can contain a lot of third party products that have nothing to do with your platform. So I could see vulnerability why vulnerability exploitation is so much higher uh in you know PaaS in the actual
Mhm.
cloud stuff versus the SaaS stuff.
And then when it came to the goals for these, 73% of cloud related incidents were targeting data in the cloud, which makes sense if you're going after SaaS applications. 45% of that was data theft without extortion. 28% was data theft with extortion. So there are more threat actors going after data just to steal it, sell it on the underground, whatever, than there are to like do a ransomware type operation where they threaten to leak it and demand money from you.
It is kind of funny though that they have ransomware separately than data theft with extortion,
I
because
wonder, oh, maybe their
maybe it's
definition of ransomware is
locker
specifically,
only ransomware rather than
yeah,
the modern don't care about locking ransomware.
exactly. That's my takeaway from that. And the last like high level stat that was interesting, when it comes to like how they're exfiltrating data out of environments, it looks like we're only a little bit away if you go to the next image after that one, from email being eclipsed by what they call platform agnostic cloud services. Basically, for the last couple of years, or last decade, they've been seeing like Dropbox, Box.com, iCloud, these kind of like cloud data hosting services that you can use from anywhere, continue to rise as the preferred method for exfiltrating data out of an organization or an environment. And what used to be the most popular, email, has been trending downward and it looks like it's only about a year away from getting surpassed by this other method.
That makes sense, especially like as we talk about securing the cloud and SaaS specifically, we have tons of controls to monitor email, not just incoming email, but outgoing email. I think if you have any sort of data loss prevention tool, you have it attached to email first, like is at a network level. But less and less, especially in small and mid-market companies, have anything monitoring SaaS. Like you threw out Dropbox, I think, but there's also Box, there's OneDrive, there's SharePoint, there's so many of these cloud services that offer ways to send big data that are used legitimately. And while you can secure that, like there are security controls that will monitor all of those SaaS applications and look for things like large data exfiltrations or unusual activity, or even scan it for certain types of confidential information. But I feel like threat actors know you have a ton of legacy secure, like because email's been around forever, you have a ton of security controls there. But if you're a smaller business, you may not have invested in protecting the hybrid cloud environment you're now using, and you're probably using that environment more than email. So it makes total sense. I think that the attackers are changing where they know people might have less protections. So
Yeah.
certainly a place to look to protect.
It was a really interesting report. They had a lot of defensive takeaways and like recommendations throughout it. They also talked through a specific example of like a North Korean threat actor stealing millions of dollars in cryptocurrency from a crypto company that was pretty interesting. But to highlight some of the recommendations that were kind of made sense. First one was just general cloud hardening. So making sure you don't have misconfigurations, following the principles of least privilege. But one that I thought was like maybe not radical, but ambitious for most companies was around patch management, where they recommend mitigate within 24 hours and fully remediate within 72 hours anytime there's a vulnerability in your
And this is more
consequences.
around the Google Cloud, AWS, and Azure, where you actually have assets that you put there that you can
Yep.
patch.
Basically, they gave a few examples of like specific vulnerabilities, like React to Shell, where they started seeing threat actors actively
That was at
exploiting
the
them
top
within
one.
48 hours of it getting patched. And so I think this requires really good visibility into vulnerabilities, but then like really mature processes to be able to even
I
mitigate within
agree.
24 hours.
It's something but and it's something I fear that the lower you go in the market, they haven't, because like everyone has moved to SaaS in the cloud. SMB probably faster than others, but it feels like the SMB doesn't have the resource to mature their capabilities. So you might be using mostly on-prem and virtualized security controls, but do you have this cloud security problem solved in patch management too? It's the same for patch management, right? The way, think about it, not only do you now have to monitor assets in the cloud, but then some of the things you're monitoring is a Docker container. Does your patch management system know how to get into a Docker container and look at all the patches within that container? And yes, there are tons of solutions for this. We know of them because we use them. We have to do this. But I don't think a lot of smaller companies have considered that yet. So it's something I think your MSPs can help with you. But with MSPs, you guys should look at solutions that are helping uh, make sure to patch manage in that way too, but also to secure misconfigurations, to look for DLP issues in SaaS apps, and to find threats there, and cloud apps, because it's obviously the wave of the future.
Yeah, well said. Really interesting report. Definitely recommend taking some time to go through it. And
Yeah.
if you do have a cloud environment or even SaaS applications, definitely, well, everyone has SaaS
Does
applications.
anyone not at this point? I would, if there's someone literally operating without the cloud, I would be interested to find out. What do
And
they do,
we
and how have they been able to keep that up?
we have some very cloud allergic customers, so I wouldn't imagine it's totally
Can you
unrealistic for
even
people to be
buy
fully
an
on-prem.
Office tool to get documents and presentations from Google or Microsoft that doesn't require a clou or any productivity? Like, you have to literally go and find someone selling Office 2018 or something. I don't know when they mo you know what I
I
mean?
mean, devil's advocate, you could be installing just like LibreOffice or something like that.
I
Like if
remember
you
that,
are
but I wonder how updated they are. I've used LibreOffice. On one hand, it's cool that they can do something, but man, no thank you, not long term.
just make sure you guys are hardening your cloud environments. Long story short, because
Yes,
they be
please.
coming and they be ready to break. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you have any questions on today's topics or suggestions for future episode topics, you can reach out to us on Blue Sky. I'm at itspark.me. Corey's at SecAdept, and the both of us are on Instagram at watchguard_technologies. You can also probably find our emails, and that may be easier to reach us at. But thanks again for listening, and you will hear from us next week.
Yeah, let's hope that we clear up the rain clouds in the future and protect them.
Someone needs to take Corey's little emoji toys away from him.
You don't like them? What's up?